Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special episode of the Belgian Football Podcast. We are finally getting round doing our transfer window review from the winter window. We've been planning this for a while, really looking forward to it. We've been trying not to talk about any transfers in our regular episodes, as you regular listeners will know, saving it all for this episode. So yeah, hopefully it's going to be a big one and it's going to be a good one. As per usual, Scott and Joris are joining me. Guys, you looking forward to this one?
Absolutely. Feels like we've been preparing for this for ages. So much to get through. In fact, I've actually brought a shopping list with me, guys. I would quite like a nice physical centre half, maybe capable of playing a good line-breaking pass and a spicy striker, please.
Let's do this. I'm happy that also the Turkish market has closed now, so we can do it. Let's pretend that we waited for them.
Speaking of spice and all that, yeah, no, I think lots of teams want a ball playing centre half and a spicy striker. So yeah, let's just dive straight in. We're going to go through this in league table order. However, this was kind of done before, so there may be a few league positions that are out of place, but I'm sure you'll forgive us, and I'm sure no one really cares. We're going to cover every team. We always cover every team. There's no biases here. We are going to obviously start with the league leaders in Union Saint-Gilloise. So let's quickly go over the ins for them. Obviously, that kind of weird situation with Dennis Undav technically an out, but then he's also come back in on loan, so kind of no change there. Interesting signing from B36 Tórshavn from the Faroe Islands, Samuel Chukwudi. Can't say I know much about him, but kind of looking forward to seeing what he's all about. Alex Milan comes in, obviously ex-Club Brugge man, but that loan was cancelled. He's now come on loan to USG from Villarreal. Cameron Puertas has come in from Lucerne in Switzerland, and Kasper Kozlowski, former Lech Poznan man, went to Brighton straight out on loan for USG. And Machida from Kashima Antlers has also come in on loan. In terms of outs, there obviously was Undav, and Marcel Lewis, the young Englishman, has gone on loan to Accrington Stanley. Either one of you want to jump on this? What's your kind of views on USG's kind of transfer business so far? I mean, it's hard to really do too much when your squad's in such a good place. You're just kind of more moving around the edges, aren't you, I guess?
Yeah, I don't think you want to mix it up too much, especially in the current circumstances, in the current situation of the club. I think they're planning quite effectively longer term, obviously. A lot of these signings are to obviously strengthen the squad to the end of the season, which I think they have done. I think there's some quality that's come in, and they've also made some money, so they come out of this window financially in a better position as well. So it's been a good window for Union, a strong one, I think, and we know for those of you who've already been lucky enough to have a listen to our special, our USG special with Alex Muzio, Alex talks a little bit about how, in fact, I think it was yesterday, Monday had a very long meeting regards their kind of summer targets. So, windows are windows, aren't they? No sooner does one shut, but you're planning for the next one. And this has been a good one for me, I think, for Union. Yep, big thumbs up.
And the one thing that stands out is, of course, the loan from Kasper Kozlowski from Brighton. But, Brighton bought him for what would have been the record sum of a Belgian transfer. So they really believe in him. Let's see what he can bring to Union as well. And definitely they strengthened in depth. That was one of the worries that people still had before January, I guess. And I don't think that really should be a worry still after the window.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think so. I just need to correct myself a little bit. Samuel Chukwudi did come from HB Tórshavn, not B36 Tórshavn. So any Faroese football fans out there kind of ringing your fists at me, I apologise. I got the wrong Tórshavn. Yeah, I'm really excited to see Kasper Kozlowski. There's been so much kind of chatter around him coming out of the Ekstraklasa. Guess for most people, probably not quite ready to make that step up from the Ekstraklasa to the Premier League, because that is a big step. So coming into a high-flying side in the Belgian Pro League is always a good shout. And I've seen a little bit of him. I haven't seen a ton of him because obviously getting into kind of that midfield area is going to be difficult. Same issue, I guess, for Cameron Puertas coming in from Lucerne. Like, he had a really good record over there, but him coming in, they're going to be kind of putting pressure on teams in positions for places. In terms of Alex Milan, I think it's the profile of a striker. Like, I don't think we necessarily saw the best of him in his time at Cercle, so I was a bit surprised that Union went for him. But physically and kind of the way he plays looks a little bit more like a Dante Van Zier, Dennis Undav sort of style. So if one of those gets injured, you can maybe plug Alex Milan in and fill the gap there.
I think that's the most interesting one, guys, isn't it? The kind of striking position, not so much Milan kind of specifically himself, although I think they've obviously identified something in his general profile that they feel quite strongly fits their own profile. Fast forward to the summer a wee bit, obviously Dennis Sundav's going to be going to Brighton. You know, how do you hopefully replace or even get close to replacing those goals ahead of next season? But then you've got one eye on European football as well, and the striking position was one that I always thought, okay, what are Union going to do here? Because there was always a possibility that either Vanzier or Undav would be leaving in the summer. We know that Undav is now. Yeah, it's that challenge of how do you find somebody who fits the system, fits the profile, and is able to kind of slip in there and hopefully do a job, particularly when they've got to cope with the demands of European football. So that was always by far the most interesting position to see what they were going to do there.
Yeah, no, I think as well with Milan, it's one of those things in football where, like, just because they weren't performing as well or producing the goods in one situation doesn't mean when they move situation it's going to be the same. Like, the players aren't robots; they're not plug in and play. Like, situation, context, all that sort of stuff makes a difference. So yeah, I'm sure they know what they're doing. They've done pretty well in recruitment so far. So yeah, looking for him to do. Yeah. I guess on the outs, there's only one, like Marcel Lewis. It's been a shame, I guess, from kind of speaking as kind of an Englishman, an English perspective, to not see more of Marcel in a Union shirt this season. I guess his probably issue has been how well they've been doing. He hasn't really been able to be afforded the opportunities to play. It's a shame he hasn't stayed in Belgium either. It would have been nice if another club had been like, oh yeah, we'll take a punt and take a loan on Marcel. But going to Acton, hopefully he can get some game time under his belt, come back and kind of really compete for a position within Union's kind of midfield area, because we know that's kind of his profile as well, like an attacking midfielder. But I guess he's just been a victim of their success so far at the moment. It's kind of, there's not enough space for everyone. So yeah, wish him luck in Accrington Stanley. Let's move on then to the side I have next on my list, which is Club Brugge, who spent a fair amount of money this window, it could be said. Obviously, with the idea that Schroeder's come in, new manager, everyone kind of knows the squads need a little bit of a refresh, maybe over the past year or so, to kind of keep it competitive, keep it kind of fighting at the top. So in terms of incomings, we have Teon Buchanan from New England, Andrzej Skov-Olsen from Bologna, Sargis Adamian from Schroeder's former side, Hoffenheim, and Club Brugge fan favourite signing, I guess you could say, of this window, in Dennis Adoy from Fulham, which was an interesting one. He has slotted straight in and been given game time, so Schroeder clearly wanted him. In terms of outs, Thibaut Pearson's gone on loan to Westerlo. Ignas van der Bremt, surprisingly, has gone to RB Salzburg. Yusuf Badji has gone on loan to Charleroi. And record signing from the summer, Kamal Soa, has gone on loan to AZ Alkmaar. I'll go first on this one. I'm bullish. I'm quite excited to see what we can get from Teon Buchanan. He's shown some energy, shown some liveliness since he's come in, and shown that Schroeder clearly trusts him in sticking him in games so early on. And it's always nice to see players coming over from the MLS and seeing how well they can adapt to European football. In terms of Skov Olsen, that one I was quite surprised that they were able to get him. I thought he has been quite a highly regarded player and kind of highly thought of player, so it's nice that they've been able to brought him in. Adamian, just not sure, I remember him having one of those players who had one or two really good games for Hoffenheim. Okay, not one or two really good games. He had one or two moments where he scored a couple of goals in succession. When people kind of get overhyped about a player because they've scored a goal and then another goal a week later, and everyone's like, oh, this guy, but when you watch them play, you're like, I'm just not convinced that this is sustainable, if you know what I'm saying. So with him, I never saw him really as a Bundesliga level player. He'd played a bit of Bundesliga too, and I remember seeing him there and thinking that was more his level. I never saw him as a Bundesliga player, so I'm not surprised they've loaned him out, but I am surprised that Club Brugge went for him. Schroeder clearly trusts him and knows him from previous, but he's just not one I've ever been convinced with. I'm prepared to be proven wrong on this, and maybe he is going to be the man for them, but I'm just not sure. And then Dennis Adoy, I mean, the fans were definitely not happy about that one. Scott, I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more on kind of the Club Brugge fan feeling. Didn't it break the forum, this transfer window for them? So, I mean, that kind of says all it needs to say.
I think it did. I think it literally did with some fan forums. I think there was a lot of rage on Bruges fans' parts here. Of course, for those of you who don't know, Dennis Adoy has has a previous connection with Anderlecht, which is at the root of a lot of the displeasure. It was interesting actually in his game at the weekend. Dennis Odoi played most of the game, and he was putting himself about quite a bit in that game. And I was watching him thinking he's trying to make a statement here. You know what I mean, showing that he's going to play for the shirt that he's wearing now. That's what I was thinking when I was watching it, because he was getting on really the wrong side of some of the discipline aspects of his game. But yeah, the Bruges fans really were not happy with this at all, and I think they've not been terribly impressed generally with the transfer business during this winter window for the club. It's a difficult one because, you know, as you were saying, Ben, they've actually spent some money. I mean, I think the incomings they've spent about approximately 12 million euros on, which comes down a little bit to about 8, obviously, when you factor in Van der Bremt's fee of about 4.5 million euros. But, you know, they've been continuing to spend, and there's no clear sense to me, particularly of a direction yet. Schroeder's come in. He obviously wants to do his own thing with the squad, and from his point of view particularly, and we did mention this a few weeks ago when he'd first come in, he'd come in at a point where there was no room really for him to influence or get involved in this window. Adamian is directly related to him. You know, an old contact of his from his time at Hoffenheim. Obviously somebody he knows well, somebody he trusts, somebody he wants around the squad. But I'm looking at it thinking, okay, you've spent a lot of money there, and I'm not sure where that leaves you going into next season either. The really interesting thing on Bruges for me actually is the Kamal Soa situation. There's a player who we know is really, really good. Came in under Clement. Started really, really brightly, almost too brightly. He was trying too hard, I think, in his first couple of games, and then kind of fell out of starts. He now obviously has gone on loan to Alkmaar. Now that's a very recent signing, 9 million euros roundabout total deal. Who's now gone out on loan? Good thing for Bruges is he's going to go out to Alkmaar and hopefully play regular football, so he's got a chance to stay fit and continue developing and maybe come back. But you're looking at that squad. Skov Olsen plays in Soa's position. Buchanan can play in that position. Lang can play there. De Ketelaar can play there in theory. I mean, Soa's arguably fourth, maybe even fifth choice for that right wing position as his primary slot, and I just don't see where he fits in anymore. So that's just a bizarre one for me anyway.
Yeah, that's definitely a bizarre one. And on the other hand as well, there's a bit with Skov Olsen, because he had said at Bologna he didn't want to play in a 3-5-2 anymore and the position that he's playing in, and that's exactly what he's doing now with, well, moving to a club that is the same. Well, that's Schreuder at least. He seems to be eyeing that same system. So I do understand that they still bought him, because indeed he's been a big talent for a few years now. Okay, at Bologna it didn't work out straight away, but that doesn't mean his career is over. Obviously, at this age, there's definitely a lot of potential, but that's a bit of a strange move, maybe from his side. Yeah, and for the rest, I guess most things have already been said. The Odoi breaking the Club form for 2 days or so, I believe, was quite funny to see. Of course, it was not only Odoi. I guess it was just anyway transfer deadline day, and yeah, a lot of traffic on there anyway. But that definitely did not help. Yeah, there's the Anderlecht fans. Being an Anderlecht youth player. And of course, he also said some bad things about the stadium a long time ago, of course. But and I think the main thing still is also, like, while at Anderlecht, he was also just not that good. His last impression in Belgium at least was not great. And yeah, I guess a lot of it is based on that. In a way, I do get that transfer because he can play on so many positions. I just don't really get that he gets 3 years at his age. That's the best part that stinks with me a bit. Then
that's a long one, and so I think we're kind of all agreed on. We like Buchanan and Skov Olsen, like that's good pluses, but Adamian and Dennis Odoi. I mean, while we were chatting, I was just looking up Adamian's stats. Like, his best season was Zweite Bundesliga Jan Regensburg 2018-2019, 15 goals, 11 assists. He hasn't had more than 2 assists in a season since then. And the most goals he scored in a season was 5 back in 2019-20. So, yeah, I don't get it. Schroeder clearly does, and maybe I'm more than happy for him to prove me wrong. I like it when players come and prove me wrong. That's great to see. But I just don't think he's of the Club Bruges level as a striker or a second striker. I think they could have found better players out there, but they didn't. Let's move on to Antwerp, who had a surprisingly quiet window. Probably should have had a quiet window given how busy the summer window was for them. Just 2 incomings for them in William Pacho joined from Independiente de Val, and then Emmanuel Emega joins from Sparta Rotterdam. In terms of outgoings, Robbie Quirn has gone to Denza in the second tier, and Didier Lamkelzee has been sent to Khimki in Russia to fight a relegation battle. I'm sure they weren't doing that out of spite whatsoever. Although, Joris, I think you were joking to us beforehand, like if they could have sent him to somewhere in Siberia, they probably would have. But alas, he got to go to Moscow, so that's quite a nice little move for him. I guess, guys, we're not really surprised that Antwerp have been quiet. They've literally got to work on the squad at the moment and integrate that. So bringing in too many players in the winter window would have just completely thrown that even more up in the air, I guess.
Yeah, they've got a good squad at the moment. Even before Pacho and Omega, I think it's generally a very strong squad. It's biggish as well. Prisk was saying in recent weeks that one of the things he wanted to do with this window was to slim the squad down a little bit, particularly now that they were out of Europe. And I think just rethink it slightly ahead of next season's European campaign as well. Pacho's someone that Antwerp have been after for a while. Actually, tried to get him in the summer. A deal couldn't be done, so they've obviously come back. And I think they've paid. I think the fees in the region of 2.6 million euros. So it's a decent fee. So they clearly see him as a starter. Actually, there'd have to be in that level of fee. Omega is an interesting one, I think. Just because I think that the striking options at Antwerp are slightly one-dimensional, I might describe them. Michael Frey is a very particular type of player. So I think there was a feeling that they needed, something else just to give them another option to effectively kind of mix it up. There's not a great deal of difference in style, I don't think, between Frey and Samata. So I think they needed somebody who offered them, something that neither of those players does. And I think Omega obviously fits what they were looking for. So it would be interesting to see, how he does kind of when he comes in and actually how often he features as well. That's one I've kind of got an eye on. But yeah, they've spent around the 4 million euros mark, and they're one of the few sides to continue to spend money. Paul Gayson not taking his foot off the pedal.
They clearly invested more in the future in some young talents here, so that's always a good thing to see, I guess. But with Emega, I've watched him in Eredivisie, and he's definitely a raw talent. So that's maybe it's also the moment to still catch him being Antwerp. But on the other hand, yeah, I'm also wondering how much will he feature, because they did not get rid of an Egerstein or a Samata. I don't know if he will actually play a lot. So indeed, then downsizing the squad definitely did not happen. It does not necessarily need to be an issue. A big squad can be helpful. But I'm just wondering if they actually indeed have some missed outgoing transfers that they had expected to do. Maybe an Abuta, since he will walk out the door. Well, it looks like he will walk out the door in the summer, as much like Juklerud last season, or Endre Failov. Yeah, I'm wondering more about the outgoing side, if things went wrong a bit there. But the talents that they got definitely look promising.
Yeah, I think you're both right. I think it's a build for the future. I think it does kind of say what they clearly don't massively trust Egerstein. I don't think it's clear that he's really struggled since he's come in. He hasn't been able to get the game time, and when he has got the game time, I don't think he's done enough to impress. Just one assist, no goals. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he left in the summer. Either on loan or out. So maybe they think Omega can then step in them. I guess they don't know if they're going to lose Frey. So yeah, I think building for the future. I'm glad they didn't go out and just start buying loads of players that can play now, though. I think that would have been a massive mistake, because the squad's big enough as it is. It's got good enough talent that they just need to gel that team together. Yeah, I think you're right, Joris. I think they probably were looking at trying to get rid of more players than they did, or they were probably open to a lot more offers on players that just didn't arrive. Because Lamkazi, he was never really been part of the squad at all. No, you knew he was going to either go or just be kind of left in the lurch and they wouldn't have wanted him to come around or anything. So yeah, and I guess Robbie Quirn, he started off the season, but as the squad built, he just didn't really get a look in. So it's a good move for him on a personal level to get to Denza, play some more 1B, challenge to get promoted, and then maybe come back and prove them wrong in 1A if he gets up with Denza. So yeah, quiet one for Antwerp, pretty quiet for Anderlecht as well. Let's move on to them. Absolutely no one coming in. So not much to talk about there. Nail Mestatu, youngster's gone to Kortrijk. And Adrian Treble is, if you remember him, he was still around. He's gone to Lucerne on loan in the Swiss league, so maybe he's going to fill the role of Cameron Puertas over there. It shows how far his stock's dropped. There was rumours of him going to Charleroi, but they were just really rumours. I think they've got quite a good thing going on. They probably didn't want to pay treble wages, or yeah, I guess that was always going to be a sticking point. Joris and Scott, are we surprised that no one came in at Anderlecht, or do we think actually, again, sort of like Antwerp, maybe not, they didn't have as big a squad, but the starting 11 is pretty set. They've got some good kind of wide players, youngsters that they can bring in. I guess maybe why one concern is they didn't bring in a centre-back. I think they really could have done with another centre-back, because I think that is an area of weakness for them, especially when Hoot's injured. Magellan, we've all kind of agreed we're not massively convinced. Obviously, Hardwood Bellis left and went back to City, so maybe a centre-back, but apart from that, a quiet window for Anderlecht.
I know Scott said that he wouldn't believe it for a moment, but actually they had said that they would not invest in transfers this winter, and well, you can't say that they didn't really keep their words, in contradiction to what Scott thought. But yeah, indeed, I'm not sure about central defense. I do get that they want to see the Basma more in action, and that's a very good choice, I think. But still, I'm not sure. Like, that comes back more to the summer window, I guess. Then should I have brought Magayan in? If it would be up to me, and I don't know, maybe there's also some personal stuff with Harvard Bellas, who knows? But if there's nothing like that, if there is a choice between those two to send back after a loan, I guess it would have been the other choice. On the other hand, he has a purchase option in his contract, I believe, and Harvard Bellas not, so maybe that also played a role in that decision. Well, I guess they take a punt with the bus there, and that's not necessarily a bad choice, but of course he will need some time to settle in.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? You know, Joris mentioning kind of what I was saying about not believing a word of that intention, and Anderlecht have been as good as their word, because technically they haven't really spent any money, you know, so from that point of view, I think it's a positive. It's interesting. Normally you would look at any club in a situation with a window like this and you would go, well, that's a bad window, because, you know, they're not, you know, there's no more depth or development or anything there at all. But the thing with Anderlecht you always have to bear in mind is it feels like there's this perpetual shifting in the squad there, even when there actually isn't. And I think they do need a period of stability. I think there is potentially quite a lot of change coming in the summer again, and all of that will depend on where they finish, where they might be playing in Europe, whether they qualify. You know, all of those things are going to have a big impact maybe on who stays. There's big noises coming out of Anderlecht at the moment that they would like to try and keep Xerxes, but that's largely out of their hands because they don't have a purchase option, and you know, he will have other suitors. So I think they just want a stable period, I think, and to reassess that in the summer. And actually, I think that's probably the right thing for them.
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned Xerxes, and I think that's kind of going to be the big changeover again. Like we had a check, obviously Nemecha was the leading man last season. It's basically the same situation, although I think Xerxes is probably a better player and going to be a better player. I think technically, physically, he's got all the attributes to be a top player, and I don't think him staying in Belgium would be the right career move. I think he could go to one of the bigger leagues. I think he's got enough about him to do that. As much as I'd love him to stay in Belgium because he's great to watch, I just don't think at the moment Anderlecht have enough to keep him. I don't think financially it would have to be another loan, in my opinion, because I just don't imagine Bayern would give him up for that for a little, you know.
I think he has another year or so, another year to 18 months in his Bayern deal, and they're looking at, I think they're open to selling him, but I think they're looking for something in the region of €8 million for a permanent deal for him, which is not something Anderlecht, you know what I mean, would certainly want to do. I think if they could secure Champions League football, and that's a big if, much like it was last season, that could change the landscape here a wee bit in terms of maybe another loan, because obviously that would finance that loan and would potentially persuade the player to stay. I don't think it's a coincidence that, you know, in Mecca chose to leave after it was finally confirmed that, you know, that wasn't going to happen for them last season as well. So it's difficult to juggle this. I mean, they're trying to put together a squad, I think, that obviously can challenge for the title, and they're not a million miles away from that. You know, if you make playoff one, then obviously in theory anything can happen, and they've been playing pretty well for the majority of the season. But I think if they get into Europe this season in a way that they didn't last season, because obviously had the big disappointment against Vitesse Arnhem in the playoff, then the squad's going to have to be different because it's going to have to cope on two fronts. And Anderlecht really need that. I think that's worth underlining. They really need some form of European football to maintain their profile, to be able to argue to players and to other clubs when they're trying to get certain transfers done that they would really like to get done. Look, we are still a big club. We're still going in the right direction, and I think you need European football more often than not to convince the level of player that Anderlecht really want to attract to the club. So it's that, it's the chicken and egg scenario.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think, we need a Mecha. I think he would have stayed if they'd got into one of the higher European competitions. I think he did quite enjoy his time there. I think he quite enjoyed the reception he got from the fans. There was clearly a lot of love for him among the fans. And I think you're right. I think they need European football. I think the squad, there's pieces in that squad that's like a couple of kind of key additions away from being a title challenging team. But because of the loan situation with those strikers and kind of with some other positions, it's like you don't know what that's going to be like next year. You're then kind of re-adding and hoping that you'll get the same or a better outcome. So quiet transfer window, but we managed to speak a fair bit about Anderlecht. So we each squeezed some stuff out of that one. Someone who had a pretty busy transfer window was Charleroi. Before the transfer window, they'd already announced the signing of Binguru Kamara on loan. A nice little kind of stopgap for Herve Coffey going away during the AFCON. He's done a good job. I think Kamara in goal, I think stepping into the shoes of the cat is always going to be difficult because he is the best keeper in the league, but Kamara's definitely held his own and shown that he's a very, very good goalkeeper. Surprisingly, bought in Vacuum Bio on loan from Ghent. Dan Heermans, as we said on our regular episode, he returned from Venezia and scored. He got a goal. Yusuf Badji on loan from Club Brugge, really interesting signing. And he also signed Ben Karamoko from Sarpsborg on a free, Sarpsborg in Norway. In terms of outgoings, Shamar Nicholson obviously left for Spartak. Pretty decent fee they got back for him, so Bio kind of comes in as his replacement. Mamadou Fall left. He went to Kasımpaşa in the Turkish Super League. Quite sad to see him go because he's done some fantastically exciting things in the Belgian Pro League, but he kind of fallen foul of the new system and the way they were playing. He wasn't really getting a look in. Lucas Rebelio has gone on loan to Valsan Beveren. Chris Bedia, he left. He went to Servette. Levi Merlungu's gone on loan to MVV Maastricht. And Amin Benchaib, he's gone to KV Kortrijk as well. So quite a few ins and outs for Charleroi. Do you think they've brought in enough attacking talent to replace Nicholson and Bio, Heermans and Badji? If you take them as a three, do you think combined they're going to have enough in terms of creativity and goal scoring to kind of make up for the loss of big Shamar Nicholson?
Well, I guess they take a bit of a gamble there, indeed, on more than one horse at least. So that's maybe not so bad, because he will always be difficult to replace. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Nicholson myself, but obviously he did score a lot. He was really in a good scoring form this season. Bayo, I'm still not completely convinced about. Badji, promising talent. Heermans also, and at least he already found the net as well now, so that sets him on a good track. So let's see how that develops. Yeah, well, I do think they did quite a good business in that. Also with the outgoing players, I don't think... Nicholson is a big one, obviously, but Bedia, Malungu, Ben Shaib maybe as well, is an interesting outgoing one maybe. But yeah, for the rest... I do think they did quite good business, replace players that they sold or that went out the door at least. At first sight, it looks like they did a good job there, also attackingly, and indeed a smart stopgap solution with Kamara, who didn't necessarily impress that much, but he also didn't disappoint. He was definitely a good choice. They don't have a goalkeeper issue as they had last season, and they won't have it at any point this season, it seems.
It's amazing to think, actually, with Charleroi that, in losing someone as important to them as Shamar Nicholson, with the amount of goals he'd scored, I mean, they were basically reconstructing their entire striking department this window mid-season, which nobody wants to do. Like the entire department, they're not just losing one striker. I mean, obviously, as Ben was saying, Nicholson's gone, main one. Fall, Dea's gone as well, and then they've brought in another three, Badji, Bayo, and Dan Heermans, who we all know very well. It's too early, I think, to say yet, quite how effective those three are going to be longer term, but in looking at it initially, it doesn't seem to have harmed them too much at all, which is incredible if you think about it. You would have expected some kind of downturn in form or a big downturn in form as they readjusted. They've maintained the kind of strong position they had even before sort of Nicholson left. So the level hasn't particularly dropped, and that's what I've been impressed by. They've come through this difficult period and not suffered as a result of that. And that is, I think, down to lots of people at the club actually. So I take my hat off to them in that sense, because I think they're one of 2 or 3 clubs who've actually had a pretty good window if you were to rate
And
them.
I also see that we actually forgot a fourth attacker that they brought in, Petkevicius, as well. So even more that makes it it's a bit weird. But Heymans is not a striker per se. I guess he's more a bit behind these other 3.
Yeah, I was about to say we forgot about Petkevicius, the free agent Lithuanian that they brought in. So, I mean, I think you guys are right. I think it's kind of been like a low risk players that they brought in. I mean, losing Fowl again, like you said, he's on the fringes. Nicholson was kind of the big one they lost, but they haven't really stepped off the gas since he's been gone. And you notice it because of what he'd bring. Like, he was quite a unique striker profile striker in that sense, but they haven't massively affected the confidence of the squad. The squad still believes in how they're playing and what they're doing and stuff. So, yeah, and I think you obviously hit the nail on the head on Vigura Kamara. Like, they haven't got a goalkeeper problem, and he'd have probably been one of their best goalkeepers last season as well if he'd been around. Like, that's how much of a goalkeeper problem they had last season. So now they've got 2, well, one incredible and then one very decent backup in terms of Kamara on loan. So unfortunately for him, obviously when Coffey comes back, he's going to step back into the starting lineup, barring any injury concerns. I know he was injured at some point during the AFCON, so hopefully he'll be back and fine. Anyway, let's move on to the Buffaloes, to Ghent. Again, not the busiest of windows from Ghent, as we're normally used to them being. They brought in Jordan Turonariga, Hertha Berlin centre-back, 24-year-old centre-back, who joins on loan until the end of the season. In terms of outgoings, that was a little bit more busy, I guess you could say. Bayo, obviously, as you mentioned, has gone out on loan to Charleroi. Jordan Botaka, he was still around, not anymore. He's gone to Fortuna Sittard on loan. Georgi Chakvetadze, he's finally left as well. Not to one of the big clubs that was rumoured to be in for him a couple of years ago. Well, not to one of the top leagues, I guess you could say. He has gone to a big club. Sorry to Hamburg fans, if you're listening, you are a big club still. So he's gone to Hamburg on loan for the Zweite Bundesliga. And Alexander De Bruyne, he left absolutely on the fringes there, but he's gone to Kortrijk to hopefully reinvigorate his career. Yeah, I guess kind of my overall look at this, I'm quite impressed that they brought in Jordan Torunariga. I remember seeing him again in the Bundesliga, and I've always thought he'd looked decent player. I think Hertha's troubles have coincided with his kind of drop in form and his struggles. So I think it's a good move for him to get out of that situation, come somewhere new, kind of refresh and get back into playing football again. Are we surprised they didn't sign a striker? I think we know they always want to sign a striker over in Ghent, but they didn't manage to get one. But yeah, are we surprised with Bayo going that they didn't bring anyone else in?
I wonder whether the joke is on us and everybody else, because, they seem to sign every striker available during the last window to the point where you thought, okay, they're only signing strikers here. What on earth is going on? So to then in this window not sign one at all feels like, a massive middle finger to everybody, which I quite like. Aniga, I think that's a really interesting signing. Only seen a little bit of him so far, but, he looks good, as does his hair, as Ben was saying recently as well. And hopefully he can stick around a lot, because I think he might have a lot to offer. Worth underlining as well, for those who don't know, although I'm not sure how you couldn't now, Ghent's transfer business is always a bit mysterious. I think that's the only way I can describe it. It's a bit eccentric in terms of the way, they try to balance their squad and who comes in. And this window's not been any different. But, they've been performing reasonably well recently, actually. So I think it was important that they didn't upset things too much. But again, being Ghent, I'm sure there'll be a big change again come the summer as well.
I think they needed to be more strikers leaving, because they still have, Malede, Bruno, De Patre, Lemaic. Well, technically still Mboyo, but I guess he won't be. I think they just announced that he won't be playing anymore for non-footballing reasons. Yeah. But and of course, Tissoudali could also still play at least as a second striker as well. So that's still, at least in quantity, a lot. So I think they really just need to make some choices there. Much like Mount Antwerp, there probably needs to be some refreshment in that squad, and some players laid off, to put it in business terms.
I love that idea. Handed in a P45 and sending them on their way. I mean, yeah, definitely in the striking department. I mean, it's just a bizarre situation, isn't it? That, I mean, I asked that question, but like you guys said, like you look at the strikers and you're like, well, you don't actually need anyone. You need to kind of refine what you have. I mean, I guess like Depotre was obviously leaving in the summer, despite having one of his best seasons for a very long time. So it's whether they see any of the others as being his replacement, because I think Tisu Dali likes to play with a bigger striker next to him. I think it really does work. So I think you say, look, like Tisu Dali is our best player. Let's get a striker in that complements him rather than doing random stuff. But as Scott said, Ghent's transfer business is confusing and shady and different, and no one really knows what's going on. So, I mean, that in an ideal world, that's what some teams would do, but who knows if they're going to do it. In terms of how it goes, I don't think there's many surprises. I guess maybe Chakva Tadze, like, he's always been on the fringes, but that kind of his position is so stacked at Ghent in terms of players, so it's good for him to get to Hamburg on loan. De Bruyne, as I said, it'd be nice for him to get some football under his belt. Bataka was always on the fringes as well. Like, it was just kind of a strange signing from them to begin with. I mean, when they signed him, I thought he could be quite a good utility player for them, but just really hasn't worked out like that at all. So good for him to get his career back on track as well by going on loan to Fortuna Sittard. Let's move on to the first of our teams where there is a slight vested interest within this podcast. That's KV Mechelen. Again, interesting transfer window business from them, actually. And Scott, obviously, I'll come to you first on this one once I've run through all the players, just to kind of see your thoughts as the man with the slight affinity for the Mechelen boys. So, Delies Voites joins on loan from Schalke 04. Rick van Drongelen, I'm really interested to see him coming over to the Belgian Pro League. He joins on loan from Union Berlin. Had some injury troubles, but I remember watching him in the Zweite for Hamburg and being quite impressed with him back in the day. So interested to see if he can find some form. And then Tony Eli Yuan comes in on loan from St. Gallen. And I'm sure, Scott, you're going to talk a little bit about him because he looks an exciting prospect. Ferdy Droof, his kind of loan period has ended. He's now via his parent club gone to Rapid Wien. Joachim van Dam has gone to Standard Liège. Sheldon Batau has gone to the Turkish second tier with Samanspor. And Igor Di Camargo, he hasn't retired. He's still going. He's gone to Molenbeek. So, Scott, what were your kind of overall impressions of the Mechelen transfer business?
I think, early on in the window, I think there was a little bit of concern at the Actor de Kazerne as to what was actually going on, because there was a slight downturn in form, which coincided with some strange footballing decisions related to things kind of off the pitch. And then some of the outgoings were a little bit worrying. I mean, losing Sheldon Battle, I think, was quite a big one, because he'd been present for so long on the side and performing really well and consistently, and you thought this guy is a dependable starter, who you can kind of build a team round, and that happened. And then you wonder, well, what's really going on? And then, Wouter Rankin's making some noises about not being entirely happy about that, wanting another defender to replace him, and then kind of being told, well, probably not, we won't be doing any more business. But Van Drongelen's come in, as you were saying, interesting pickup, that one, I think. He's got his defensive cover, so, Wouter will be reasonably happy with that, because I don't think he was happy about Battle leaving at all, and that's what the code was. They've not had a bad window, actually. I think overall they've tried to be very careful about this and not just spend too much money. I think they could have pushed the boat out a little bit more, but they've very deliberately chosen not to do that, because they're one of only 6 clubs over the last 12 months to be in profit. So I think they're being very careful to kind of stay that way, which is smart. Freddie Droyf leaving is an interesting one. Obviously, he had a slightly slow start. Then he started scoring and doing quite well, and then unfortunately got injured and lost his place. And what you tend to see with strikers at Mechelen is, if they're getting injured and someone else comes in and is doing all right, it's actually very difficult for you to get back in. So I think that was just one of those where they decided, well, you're not the main man anymore. The loan's ended, and it was just horrible timing in that one. Reasonable window. They're in good shape. I think their objectives for a playoff 2 spot minimum are still on track. So, I think they come out of this window all right, actually.
Yeah, I think the combination of being in a good place in the classification and indeed, still having financial difficult times for everyone made them wait a bit longer and go for loans. I was actually surprised now with Van Drongelen that he's only 23, because indeed he's been in Hamburg for quite some time, and I was surprised that he's actually still, he just came at a really young age as well. So that indeed an interesting pickup, and yeah, we'll see how that develops. Maybe they'd lack a bit of a striker, and for an extra additional striker, they're quite dependent on Storm at the moment. Of course, Storm is also not the main striker, but at least the goal man, and maybe Eliuan actually can fill that spot as well if need be.
I'm just going to say, guys, he's an interesting one. Ben mentioned him a minute ago. I think he's the surprise package in a way. He's the one that, because he can play as a striker, but he can also play on the left wing. Not that Mechelen need anyone else to play there, actually. And their midfielders tend to pitch in with a lot of goals as well, as we know. But his numbers are fantastic. Eli Ewens, I was quite surprised that they were able to price him away from St. Gallen, actually. He's been playing regularly there. I think he's got something like, just off the top of my head, something like 6 goals in 15 with a couple of assists thrown in there. So his numbers so far this season are really decent. So I'm quite excited to see, how often he features and whether they do play him up front or stick him out wide. But he I think of all of the incomings, I think he's the most interesting one.
Yeah, no, you spot on there, Scott, in terms of his stats. So he pulled them right out of the bag. Yeah, no, he's definitely one to watch. And like I said, I'm it's hard to be excited when teams sign a centre back, isn't it? But I think you're right. When Bital left, I was like, why? He has been and was a decent defender for them this season. I mean, we know Mechelen do have their issues at defending set pieces and stuff like that. But Van Dongelen, yeah, like Joris said, he's been around for a while despite his age. He was also captain of Hamburg when they were trying to get back up. So he's been through some tough times, because that's a massive club that has a lot of pressure on it to get out of the Zweite Liga that he's had to deal with. And he's always been one of those players that's kind of been on fringes of teams thinking, yeah, no, he could step up and play at a higher level. He got that chance at Union, and kind of injuries and like their form and the players they have means he hasn't really had the chance. So I think he's going to be a good pickup for them. I'd like to think that he'll show a bit more form coming back, and I'd be kind of nice if he, at the end of it, was able to make it a permanent move, because I think they could really benefit from that if he can refine some form and rediscover his level. I think he could be really good signing. Yeah, in terms of players out, I guess apart from Batal, everyone else was kind of fringy. De Camargo was like your last 10 minutes, 15 minutes of the game, chuck him on to hope you get a goal. Apart from when all the strikers got injured, so he had to start, and he still did what he always does, which is like back down defenders, win his headers, do all that stuff for you. But he is getting on a bit. Cruyff as well, it just didn't quite ever click consistently for him, which was a shame. But yeah, I agree. I think apart from Yuan, like, it is looking a little bit light up front, because Engvall they don't really trust. I don't think they haven't really used him much since he came in. So interesting to see how they get on. Hopefully, if Kuipers and Storm can stay injury free, it could be quite a good window for them. But if they get injured, then you're kind of struggling a little bit. But we'll see how that one gets on. Let's move on to one of the form sides, Cercle Bruges. I guess kind of like Union, you're kind of looking more at the fringes of the squad, because they're quite happy with the core of their squad. So Ganvula comes in from Bochum, the man that I'm sure Anderlecht fans will remember not so fondly. Again, I'm harping on about the Zweite Bundesliga. It seems to be the theme running through this transfer window is Zweite Bundesliga players that have played well in that league, and now they're coming into the Pro League. But that's when Ganvula was at his best. And even Bochum's promotion season last season, he didn't really feature as much. So he's been on the fringes there quite a bit. So I guess it could be a good move for him. For Cercle, they've obviously Milan gone, so he kind of comes and fills that role, but he's a different striker altogether from Milan. But then Denki's finding form again, so there's not much of an issue. Matondo obviously playing up front. Deman as well. Like, they've got enough players, I think, there. In terms of outgoings, obviously Milan, as we said. Arnie Cassette joins Royal Knocker on loan. Kylian Hazard, another one of those, like, remember him? He was still around at Cercle, but he's now gone on loan to Molenbeek. I can't imagine he's going to be back in a Cercle shirt again. That's probably the end for him, but it's nice for him to actually go and play some football. And then Serge Yao has left for Rodez. So more outs than ins, but I guess probably not surprised given their form. They didn't really want to upset it too much after quite a busy summer window as well.
Yeah, I think we're starting to see the signs of a different approach to transfer windows from Circle, which is a good thing. And what I mean by that is everybody's been so used to them having windows both in the summer and the winter for years where, you're dealing in a lot of loans and a lot of loans that everybody knows aren't going to become permanents, so a lot of change. So a quiet window is no bad thing for them, as you were saying, Ben, now that they've kind of settled into a really good period of form and they found a recipe now at Circle, I think, on the coaching staff and on the data science side of things that is working for them really, really well. And clearly the squad are enjoying that as well because, it's showing in results and it shows them physically as well. So they're responding to what's been put to them. And that's another sign that, that things are kind of coming together there. So it's no surprise to me that they've actually had they've had a quieter window. And I think that's a positive sign in their particular case. Ganvula's an interesting one because his profile as a striker fits the way that they're going to be playing as a team now. So that's obviously specifically why they've gone and picked him up. He fits their strengths. Not seen much of him so far, of course, but he's only been in for about 5 minutes.
100% of the signings they did this window were alone, though. So well, that's another thing. But okay, that's joking aside. Though I think they didn't need to do much. I think if the situation would have lasted, if you would have asked that 2 months ago, situation probably could have been a bit different as well. But I think they're in a happy place at the moment, and so I don't think they really needed to do much, and they also didn't indeed replace a striker with a striker.
I think internally inside the club, I don't know. I think this might have been a slightly frustrating window for them in the sense that I think there were a number of other names that they were quite keen to bring in. So I think their intention was to bring more in, to strengthen quite a bit more if possible ahead of next season and potentially have a quieter summer. That's what my feeling about it was. But there are a number of deals that they couldn't get over the line for quite complex reasons. All transfers are extraordinarily complex now, as everyone knows, but they have been thwarted with at least a couple that they were very, very keen on for reasons largely out with their control. So although I was saying it's been quiet, and I think that's a positive thing, which I think it is, I think their intentions were a little bit different to, how it looks from the outside. Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, one of those names I think was George Bello from Atlanta in MLS, who eventually he's now went to Arminia Bielefeld instead. So yeah, I can imagine there was frustration there. But I guess when we think back to when we spoke to Carlos Avina for the Circular Special back in, it's basically the end of the last transfer window, wasn't it, around that time? And we asked him at that point if they were looking to strengthen. He was very happy with the squad, and he said, "No, I'm happy with kind of what we've got at the moment." I do wonder, like Joris said, I wonder if during the season, as things weren't going so well, if they had start to get a list of players and names together, but as things started to improve, they probably went back to that other idea of actually, no, we're happy with what we've got. We think this squad is good enough, and they have been vindicated in that in terms of change the manager, implement the style of play that they brought the players in to do, and it's worked. So they can kind of say, actually, yeah, we did our core business in January in the summer. Now we've just kind of brought in a player to replace a player that's going out who was on the fringes anyway, with a player that might not necessarily start, but we think we can get something out of. And I think it's kind of like a bit like with Charleroi, it's kind of like a risk-free signing in Gamp. We were like, either he's going to be great or he's just going to come off the bench and do something for you to give players that are starting a rest. So yeah, and I think in terms of outgoings, nothing major really there, is there? Like Kylian Hazard's been on the fringes for the whole time. Raul Yao's like barely played. I can't remember him playing a game for them. And Arnie Cassette, the youngster, going on loan to Nokia, you get some experience. So a quiet window, but I think they're happy with what they've got. They kept hold of someone like Dino Hotic, which I think is quite big. Not that there were any rumours of him going, but in terms of keeping players, it's always important. Quarterlight had a busy one, and let's definitely get onto them next. So from FC Tokyo, they brought in Toshuyo Watanabe, who started almost every game since he's joined, I think, apart from the one he wasn't allowed to play, or none of these guys were allowed to play. I mentioned earlier, Alexander De Bruyne joined in from Ghent, Nael Mesatao in from Anderlecht. They won the Brian Reynolds sweepstakes. Some teams were interested in him, lots of Belgian teams apparently. He joins on loan from Roma. Amin Benchai from Charleroi, as we already mentioned. I'm sure Belasheen's kind of relationship with Charleroi probably played a role in that, and thinking, yeah, I can imagine they went to him and were like, we're thinking of bringing him Amin Benchai. Like, what do you think? And he's probably like, yeah, let's do it. I like him. David Hennon, he joins from Grenoble. In terms of outgoings, Brendan Hines Ike, who I'm not gonna lie, guys. When I saw that he was leaving Kortrijk, I was like, "Who?" Like, I was like, I don't think I remember ever seeing him play a game for them. But he went to DC United, so forgive me, I might have just been completely oblivious to him. But he's gone to DC United, so fair play to him. That's probably a nice move for him as an American. Timothy Dejic gone back to Zoltava Gem for quite cheap. Gilles Deval went to Standard for a reasonable fee. They got some good money for him. Nihad Mujakic, FK Sarajevo for a little fee. Summer signing Matthias Fixels kind of was a bit part player this season off the bench. He's gone to Westerlo. It's a good signing for them. And Erika Kanzi has gone to Vaslin Beverant on loan, which I think is a really good move for him. I think it's a good chance for him to get back into playing some football in 1B at the top of the league sort of stuff. So I don't know what you guys think, but I feel like what they've lost, they've just brought in replacements. It's been kind of like, okay, we've lost a right back in Deval. We're going to bring in Brian Reynolds. We've lost Tajic, the centre back. We've brought in Watanabe, so that's fine. They lost Fixels. They brought in Ben Shive. De Bruyne can do that as well. Mesatu's like the youngster for the future, and then David Hennon. Like his numbers at Grenoble aren't incredible, but he's kind of like a wide striker, wide man. So I don't feel they need a starting wide man anyway with Mbaye, Moreno, and Selemani. They just need like a backup player. So maybe that's more of his role. I don't know, Kanzi going, so he kind of can fill that role for them. So yeah, I'm not massively like impressed with what they've done, but I think they've had a pretty good window, all things considered.
I'll solve a mystery for you. Heinz Eyck was already on loan to DC United since almost a year. So actually last season, I think he still played a bit in the beginning of the season, but probably also not that much. That he came back and now they bought him, I believe, or was it even on a free? I don't know.
That makes so much more sense.
Yeah, and I agree a bit, although there's one weird thing in that whole transfer story. I think like they had an agreement with Mesatu already for signing him as a right back for next season, coming over on a free from Anderlecht, and then they still they brought in Reynolds, which I understand. So then you don't need then you have replaced Avale, but now they actually. I guess it's more like a structure, but like they made sure that they got Mesatu. Yeah, they brought him in now then for at least some maybe future money. So like they really wanted him there already. If they would not have loaned Reynolds, then I would understand indeed try to get the other one that you already have for the next season. And now it's like they bought two. Well, maybe just to see how it goes. I guess the combination of these two transfers is a bit weird. But for the rest, yeah, I think they did okay business. Nothing spectacular. It's nothing terrible. Davalo leaving is probably the biggest name for them. The player that played most for them at the moment still. Okansi leaving. Yeah, I guess he didn't feature that much anymore. But like he's always been an interesting prospect. But I guess he has stagnated a little. Yeah, let's see what he can do in 1B. I think he should be a top player for 1B.
Yeah, I feel quite positive about their business, actually. I think they've done some good business, and I think if even two or three of them come in and perform quite well, then it'll have been a really good window for them. Reynolds is the most surprising one, I think, because as Ben was saying, there were a number of other sides, bigger sides in the Pro League, quite keen on Brian Reynolds. So to see him go to Kortrijk was a bit of a surprise for everybody. I think that has more to do with the fact that perhaps he was promised more game time at Kortrijk, and I think it's more likely that he's going to be a starter there than at some of the clubs that he could have ended up for. And I think that's probably been a major factor in his decision in the end. But I think their window's really been very good. One name that we haven't mentioned so far, because we're actually getting ahead of ourselves here, is they have agreed a pre-contract with Denza's attacking midfielder Yusuf Chalit, which is very, very exciting to all of us here at the BFP, because he was a player we flagged up on our bumper pre-season preview as being somebody to keep an eye on. Really good player in 1B who we couldn't understand why hadn't been picked up by a 1A club. Well, now he has. His contract at Denza's ending this summer, and he'll be moving in a pre-contract to Kortrijk then, so we can look forward to seeing him in the Pro League in 1A next season. But yeah, good window for Kortrijk, and I think they're well placed to continue to be a competitive side.
Yeah, no, I've been banging that Shaduk drum for so long, like more than happy it happened. And also, it just like the last player they signed on a free contract in January last season, Kevin van der Dies came in, has been one of their best players this season. So there you go. Shalik's going to have a Kevin van der Dies impact. But no, I'm really excited to see him get his chance in 1A with Kostrika as well. I think that's the sort of club I was envisioning him going to, where he can get some game time and like hopefully impress and kind of show why he deserves a shot in 1A. Another sort of quiet window, but also a reflection of like when summer business hasn't been as great. We'll go to Genk. In terms of incoming, is Azeed Mohammed from Hammarby. I think we've spoken before on the podcast about how they needed a bit more physicality and steel in the midfield, and it looks like that's why they brought in Mohammed. In terms of outgoings, Ugbo has gone on loan to Troyes. Cal Eiting, again, one of these summer signings, he's just gone on a free to Huddersfield. Benjamin Nygren, just one of those players that was out on loan for a while. He's finally left on a permanent to Nordsjælland. And Bastian Tommett has gone on loan to St. Gallen. So, Joris, obviously I went to Scott on Mechelen. I'll have to go to you on Genk. What was your kind of overall impression of the transfer window for Genk?
Well, relatively quiet, and that's probably good. Okay, of course, they're not in a good position. Probably one of, if not the most disappointing side of the season so far. Also, in that, also with a huge squad, and now they're out of Europe. They're also out of the cup, so they needed to get some players out, or at least get them some playing time. Although a lot of the business was by the end of the window. You were right with the incoming one, Azit Ouattara. Yeah, that's probably a type, at least, of player that they needed. He hasn't featured much yet, but we'll see how it goes. But as a type of player, that's definitely what they needed. Thomas, they see a future for still in Genk, but just not right now, since there's too many players ahead of him at the moment. So he is out without a purchase options. Hopefully he gets indeed some playing time and then comes back as a better player. I think that was a bit of a weird one as well, but apparently both sides basically agreed like that in the direct future it doesn't look like he's gonna get any playing time either, and both sides even agreed on the longer term it doesn't look good either. So how they let him go maybe up for questions, but I guess there's some that's probably more legal stuff that we need to look into, but let's not do that. Nugent, yeah, he had a disappointing loan spell lately at Heerenveen, and I guess they were happy to let him go to Nordsjælland. And well, hopefully he's still really young, but hopefully he gets his career back on track there. Well, the Ugbo one is probably the surprising one, but apparently he didn't really buy into the story of Stork, and he was already unhappy for a few months while he has only been there for a few months. So Onuachu competed him out of playing time, I guess, and he was hoping for more, so he's out on loan as well. With the purchase options, yeah, it had been a bit disappointing. The playing time that he got wasn't that much, and now, okay, behind Onuachu there is a little gap, but there's a lot of youths knocking on the door. So let's hope that if anything happens to Onuachu, or even if not, that they get some playing time. It's already a bit of a rebuild, partly, I guess, of the squad for next season.
I get a definite sense that Stork's trying to reshape the squad to his liking. I mean, if you think about it, because of what Joris was saying about the season being so disappointing up till now, in a way there was no real pressure. Obviously, there's pressure on chasing a kind of playoff 2 spot minimum if possible. That's got to be the potentially big prize for the end of the season. But I think he's had a good look at this, and I suppose that's the advantage of being in this situation and coming in under the circumstances he has, is in that he's able to decide over a prolonged period of time, really, who he wants, who he doesn't, and kind of set himself up with a balance of squad that he wants for the start of next season, because the real judgment on Bernd Stork's going to come in the first couple of months or so of next season, when the squad is fully his, and he's started with a kind of clean slate. Some surprises in there. I mean, I think yours is right. Ugbo was a bit of a surprise, but if there's a feeling that you're not aligned in a footballing sense with what a coach is trying to do, then that's always the best option, just to go and play elsewhere. I think surprised me a bit, just because I think there is some quality there, and I think he did show that on a number of occasions. So I was surprised at kind of how easily the club did let him go. But I think, as Joris was getting at as well, I think there are a lot of different factors probably influenced that decision in the end. So it's no surprise that they've had kind of quite a quiet window. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the summer as well, because next season is going to be big for them, just because this season was just really flat, really.
The Ugbo one, yeah, I'm more surprised about kind of like, well, what was he kind of expecting? Do you know what I mean? Like, Onuachu was the top scorer last season, like, in the league. He set a record in the league. Like, you were always going to come in and have to either compete with him or play second fiddle to him. And the thing with that is you then have to take your chances, like, when you do. And, like, he scored a couple of goals, but we know what Ugbo's kind of thing is from his time at Circa. Like, doesn't offer much outside of in the box, but when he's in the box, that's when he thrives. That's when he gets his goals. That's when he's effective. So it's quite difficult in a way to then kind of prove yourself as being valuable without just doing that. Like, if that's not coming off for him, it's quite a struggle. So hopefully for his sake, the Trois move does kind of pay off. But yeah, I think we know that that'll be kind of the striker position will have to be looked at for Genk in the summer, unless they do just trust the youth. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting time of transition. Let's move over to their neighbours, the Canaries and St. Truden. They've had an interesting window, but we knew they kind of wanted to do more in the summer. Well, Hollaback wanted them to do more in the summer. It didn't quite happen. But they definitely made some moves this winter. Shinji Kagawa, the Japanese legend that he is, joins on a free from Pauk. Alessandro Russo was kind of like an emergency pickup from Sassuolo to go and goal. So he's already featured a little bit. We've spoken about him on the podcast a fair amount as well. Amin Aldakil joins from Standard Liège, and João Klaus via Standard to Hoffenheim on loan. There's a whole situation there, so I'll get one of you guys to explain that to our listeners as to why those two have made that move. In terms of outgoings, Yuma Suzuki's finally gone. Not the direction we thought he'd go. He's gone back to the J League with Kashima Antlers, kind of rebuild his career up again, and then maybe get that move to Europe that he was looking for, or maybe a completely different move. Who knows? He maybe just be happy in the J League. Nothing wrong with that. Jonathan Boatu has moved to Oyupspor on loan. Tatsuya Ito links up with his old coach from at Hamburg to go to Magdeburg on loan. Kakache has gone to Empoli on loan, quite surprising there. And Alexander Filipov has gone to FK Riga on loan. Cue the joke that, let's say he has a good game against Genk in the Europa League or Conference League games for Riga in the summer, and maybe he'll be back in the Pro League with them. Lemajic said that it's definitely possible. Scott Joris, which one of you wants to explain to our listeners why, Aldakil and João Klaus have ended up at St. Truden via Standard Liège?
I'll be happy to tackle this one. There's the whole situation with Junior Edmilson, who went from Sint-Truiden, who had a really good season at Sint-Truiden before going to Standard. And Sint-Truiden there then had a salon clause as well. So if he would go, Standard have played it a bit, tried to get away with it in a different way. The payment for that transfer went via a bit of a shady structure and holdings. And though there was and still is at the moment, I guess, a case for FIFA, and this is basically a way of buying off the sum that is needed. So Aldakil and Klaus going to Sint-Truiden. And well, maybe I'll also already jump to what I think of their business. And well, actually, I don't think they probably had one of the worst windows. Okay, we still have a lot of teams to go, but from the ones we had so far, probably the worst window of all. Like Kagawa, well, it sounds interesting, but I do think it's still just a prestigious transfer because he hasn't been impressive in the last few seasons at all. But of course, then there's Aldakil, and that's probably still the best one in a way. But of course, there are circumstances why that is happening. Klaus, okay, he could be interesting for them. And Rousseau is also a clear one, at least. A bit like with Kofi, it was a stopgap while Schmidt was away for on international duty with Japan, and they had to play a few games. He's done that, and that's that. But like Suzuki gone, Boatu gone. Boatu didn't feature that much, okay, but Suzuki gone, Kakache, and especially Kakache gone. That's a surprising one indeed, and I don't think they didn't really replace him. It's a bit of a weird window.
Weird indeed. Joris is not wrong. It looked for a couple of days like St Truden were about to take on a third of standard squad, or anybody who they didn't want that they were willing to take. It was looking quite bizarre for a wee while. I think the pickup of Aldakiel is a very good one. A lot of potential in him, and he was a very firm favourite of Mbaile's. When he was at Standard, he was a big fan of Aldakiel's, started quite regularly under him as well. So it looked like he had a big future there at one point before Mbile lost his job. I tend to agree with Joris about Kagawa. I think, the jury's very much out in that because he's not been fit for quite some time. So he needs to prove that he can get fit. If he does, then I don't see why he can't make an impact and have something to offer, but we just don't know about that yet. Klaus is interesting as well because Klaus kept changing his mind as well, didn't want to go to St Truden, then he was open to the idea, but only once other deals fell through, and then only went to St Truden very, very late on actually. So, he was flipping and flopping kind of quite a lot. I've been saying for a while, actually, when talking about St Truden, that they really need to do some business. They need to do something with that squad because they can't rest on their laurels and hope that kind of solid defensive base that they've got as a side, which sees them, kind of pick up odd wins here and there and get draws that kind of keep them consistently inconsistent, perhaps is the way you could describe it. They needed to invest a little bit, I think, to try and change that. And I think Aldakiel, yeah, that's a great signing, not one that normally fits their profile. I think they spent about €450,000 on that deal, but they could do that because I think Suzuki brought in about 1.8. So that left them a little bit of leeway. Yeah, I mean, I feel a little bit more positive about their business than Joris does. I think Klaus probably fits into the way they play better than he did at Standard. So I wouldn't be surprised if he did slightly better there. And obviously he's already provided his first assist. So I hope he does do well there because before he went, he made it kind of quite clear he didn't really want that move. So, when that's made public before you sign on the dotted line, sometimes it's kind of quite hard to win people over. But he's done that already.
Yeah, no, I think on the Klaus one, I think you're right, Scott. I think in terms of he suits the system because they play that 3-5-2, so he always gets to play in the two. And we saw when it was him and Rileka in the two, that was quite decent. So Centurion just sort of tried to get him and Rileka as part of the deal as well, like chuck him in the two and it'd be fine.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Maleka because obviously we know that in the last 24 hours or so, he's much to our dismay here at the BFP because we're big fans of Jackson Maleka. He's left, but Maleka was one of those standard players that was on that list of would you be interested in any of these guys? So he could have ended up at St Truden, but my understanding was that just the deal couldn't be done for various reasons. But yeah, he may well have gone there
It's
as well.
like I'm trying to compare it to. I know the situation I'm thinking of when like you're at school or at work or someone comes in and it's like, right, I need some volunteers to go and do this like random task, which involves like leaving the office and going somewhere really random to do something really random, and no one really wants to volunteer because everyone's kind of like, well, I don't really want to go and do that, and it's kind of like they walked into the changing room like, lads, we need some people to go to St Trude, and like, who's up for it? Like, who fancies it? Doesn't matter who. Like, we'll just if we have to, we're going to start picking on people. So if you volunteer, like, it'll be much easier for everyone. So I feel like that's kind of what happened there, and they centered on Dekil and João Klaus. Kagawa, yeah, my kind of theory on this signing is not. They're not massively. Obviously, they'd love to get him on the pitch and do some stuff on the pitch, but I feel like his impact will be felt more off the pitch because this is a man who's played in Europe a lot. He knows how to acclimatise to different situations and stuff like that, and I think he could be really useful for some of the guys coming over from the J League who are acclimatizing to a different culture, different style of play and all that. He can kind of get alongside them and be like, they could just kind of pick his brains on like, okay, this sort of thing, this thing off the pitch as well. I think he could be really, really useful for them. I'd love to see him show a little bit of form that he used to show when he was at the top of his game because he was one of the most he was such a good player to watch. So hopefully we can get a little bit out of him like that. But I think you're right. I don't think we should expect to see too much of him because he hasn't really shown that form for quite a while now. But yeah, in terms of outgoings, I was surprised to see Kakache leave, but I guess he's quite a hot prospect, so lots of teams would be interested in him. Anyway, let's move on to Standard as we were talking about them. They are the next team on my list. So in terms of incomings, we've kind of spoken about them through other teams, but they brought in Mathieu Cathero from Rams, Joachim van Dam, obviously from Mechelen, Gilles de Waal from Kortrijk, and they brought back Renal Emond from Nantes. So they kind of brought the big striker back so they could get rid of João Klaus in that sense. As Scott said, Jackson Muleka has gone. He's gone to Kasimpasa on loan, so he joins Mamadou Fall. Alan Delfari has joined Hibs. Fostav Mbani has gone to Maastricht on loan. Amin Aldakil to St. Turin, as we said. Nicholas Gavary has joined my team, Fortuna Düsseldorf, who desperately needed a left back, so I was quite happy with that. Felipe Avenatti has left Union, back to Standard, straight back out the door again to Beerschot. And Hugo CK, who we've spoken about before, he obviously left for Freiburg, so Deval kind of came in his replacement, but now Deval's injured, so they've got an issue at right back there. I guess we weren't sure because there was talk about like they'd only been able to bring in like 1 or 2 players, but they've actually done a reasonable amount of business. Kafra, I think we've said we've been quite kind of impressed with in terms of his signing. He's shown some ability and stuff. I mean, he has like a history of some misdemeanors and stuff like that, so they want to keep him on the pitch and keep him on the straight and narrow there. But Joachim van Dam, I guess, comes in as like, he knows the league, he's been around, he can kind of do some stuff in the middle of the park for them when they need. Deval, as we said, like the right back spot needed filling. Emond, they know him. He's actually been pretty decent since he came in. Also, sorry, I forgot to say, Lestien recently, he's moved to Singapore, I think. So they've shifted a couple of the high earners off the books. They brought in a couple of players, but I don't know what you guys, but my kind of opinion on this is a transfer window for the now. It's not about the future. I don't think, apart from Cafaro, the other players they brought in, Van Dam, Deval, Emond, they're not players that are thinking, yeah, we're going to be able to build a squad with these guys in it. They're more like, we need to sort the situation now. These guys give us a chance to do that. Let's bring them in. Then we'll reassess in the summer and try and bring in some other players.
Without the now, fixing the now, there might not be a future. That's basically the underlying part. Yeah, I agree. Don't think they really invested for the future. They let some players go. They had indeed reasonable amount of business and a reasonable amount spent even. They didn't keep their word, unlike Anderlecht. They had a bit more of signings. But I think they did reasonably well. Emo, I think, is an upgrade to Klaus. If he also is to Muleka is another thing. I don't think so, but I guess he's not completely out the door yet. Just on a temporary solution. Del Ferrier, they'll be happy to get some money for him. Yeah, Aldakil is we touched on already. It was a bit of a weird one, but there's a different story there. Gavary, they also got a little money. CK is a big one, of course. I guess they did a reasonably good job in picking up the wallet for him. It's not an upgrade, and there's less potential, I guess. But for the now, it's an okay solution, I guess. It's still a bit of a downgrade, I think, but yeah, it's okay. Busier business than expected. Van Damme is also a bit of a weird one. I do think his playing style fits. We'll see what this brings, but I think it's really still more about the survival of the club at the moment and above anything else.
Yeah, I think Joris's point's very important actually there, because I think we all know, and we've talked about this a lot as well, that things aren't fundamentally going to change at Standard until the financial situation improves a little bit. And it is very, very slowly when you actually look at the detail. I mean, something like 10 outgoings here, kind of in total. The outgoings have brought in around 4.95 million euros, I think, in total. In terms of incomings, they've spent 855,000 euros on that. So quite a modest outlay for players who, and I agree with both you guys, are kind of for the short term, really. Cafaro's looking very good. Do like that signing. He's performing well too, straight from the off, which will be very pleasing to them. I think it was a case of, this window could have gone almost anyway for Standard, actually. I think their main priority was to get as many as possible out, I think, partially to save some money, but also to kind of give them some manoeuvrability within this window. And within that context, it's actually not too bad when you look at the financials of it. But, until a new investor comes in, then I think things aren't going to change much in terms of the quality and depth of that squad. Their hands are also tied as well, because the new stadium developments, the infrastructure developments, it's less than, the filling in of the corners and improving some of the facilities and thoroughfares around the stadium and on the access approach to the ground. They're due to start really very soon, and will start before next season. So they're going to cost money. The club's not paying for it all themselves, obviously, but that's going to reduce further any potential outgoings. So yeah, it's difficult to be too harsh on them, their judgment in that window, because if you judge them in a playing sense, yeah, yes, I don't think they are particularly better, but if you look at it in a financial sense, it makes sense, and they are a little bit healthier if you're, looking at that.
There's one concern I really have. What if something happens to Emo? Because in contrary to other sides, they're not that far even from relegation. It feels absurd to talk about that, but even now, but like they are not completely safe yet. So if something would happen to Emo, I'm not sure what the alternatives are, but they're no, with Muleka and Klaus gone. Okay, there's Dragus. He can fill in a bit, but I'm also not sure if it's enough. Yeah. So anyway, if there's a few issues at the on top of the pyramid, then they might struggle even more than people expect. But well, I guess that's a slight gamble they're taking, and at least let's just hope that he doesn't get injured.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think Dragus would have to be the option. But then again, if he missed out as well, I guess you go Donham. I know he played that well for Valerenga a little bit, like kind of second striker role as well as being out wide. So he potentially could do it, but that's not a situation you want to get yourself into when you're near the bottom of the table. I think you're right. I think I would rather have a striker I can semi-trust in reserve rather than be like, okay, yeah, we'll loan you out and we'll just rely on Aemond and Dragus. But yeah, hopefully he doesn't get injured, but you just can't guarantee that he won't. With any player, you've got to like have backups. That's the art of squad building, I guess. And as we heard from Alex Muzia when we were speaking to him, it's all about trying to keep those fringe players happy, and that's kind of the job that you have to do. And like, it's difficult, but it can be done if you put the right things in place. So yeah, let's see how they get on. But I think, yeah, like I said, like you guys said, it's a transfer window for the now, and it's all about getting to the summer and reassessing. Let's move on to the coast. The Kust boys in Oostend. Busy on the ins, absolutely no one went out. So they brought in Alessandro Albanese from Vazan Beveren. Fans of 1A last year would have seen him in action. Tatsurio Sakamoto from Cerezo Osaka on loan. He looks a really, really interesting player. Got great feet, great technique. So definitely one to watch. His debut was fantastic. Scott will obviously have to ask you a lot about Osaze Urhogaide, the Celtic loanee. And then they brought in Kjell Sherpen from Brighton, the big goalkeeper, who got a start immediately. They've now got some competition in the goalkeeping spaces. They've obviously brought in Albanese, who knows the league a little bit from last season. He showed glimpses of being a really good player, so interesting to see. Sakamoto, we've spoken about, it looks like a good player. Scott, what can you tell us about the Celtic loanee? Are we seeing Jack Hendry part 2? Is that what we're going to see from him?
Well, it was interesting when this deal was kind of confirmed the other week. I had a wry smile to myself because obviously Gote Ganai, the CEO at Oostend, obviously knows some of the hierarchy at Celtic, having done business around Jack Hendry before. So I'm sure there's been some quite interesting conversations there around, the Celtic squad and who might be available. Contacts when it comes to signings, as we know, are very, very important no matter what club you're at, and that did make me smile. I thought, are we really hoping lightning will strike twice here? It's interesting because he's a very good young player, actually. Bit of a surprise that he got his move to Celtic when he did just last summer. It's not that long ago. Hasn't been able to break into the side for all sorts of reasons, very complex. Only played one game for the senior side, which rather bizarrely was actually against Real Betis in the Europa League. So it was no small game that he featured in, and he actually did very well. He played the 90 minutes and looked good, but he's well down the pecking order there, but has tremendous potential. He has all the attributes, I think, as a young defender to do very well in the Pro League. And I think there were a lot of clubs interested in him, and I think he's chosen the right one to go to. I think Celtic have probably sold it to him on the basis of Jack Hendry's experience. If you go there with the right attitude and apply yourself, then you will get your move. And Oostend have been smart here because they have negotiated a purchase clause in there. So if it goes well for him, then he's highly likely to be staying in Belgium. So I think that's a really good move for him. And I think that, for me, that and Sakamoto are the two best pickups at Oostend. Sherpen's an interesting one, but difficult to get excited by because I don't think he'll be staying, too pricey. But Sakamoto and Urhogaide could be really, really good for Oostend, I think, if things come off for them. I think their business has been quiet, but what they have done, I think, has been kind of quite good.
Yeah, and I guess it's not a surprise that they didn't have any outgoing transfers this time, because obviously that happened in the summer. And I think also, like, they actually brought in a few players now that's still a bit of squad depth that they needed. Yeah, and I agree. Most of these players look, or actually all of these player incoming transfers look promising, or not like, okay, Scherpe, I don't know if it was needed. Sakamoto looks promising. Albanese looked promising last season. The Celtic loanee, Urgo Heide. Yeah, so, Scott knows more about that, but he already gave some nice words there as well. So, no, I think reasonably good business for them.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think interesting that no one left. It was all just kind of incomings, but it's kind of like similar sort of like their transfer, the way they do the transfers. It felt very Oostendy as it has recently. Apart from no one came in and then went straight on loan to France as they did in the summer. That was kind of like the big play there. One team that did a lot more transfer business than they had done in the summer were Eupen. Kind of, again, quite some interesting pickups from Eupen. They brought in Teddy Aller from PSG on loan, Torben Mösel, who've been playing third division football from Mushibrinch and Gladbach. Ionis Constantilias comes in on loan from Palka. He's like 18, 19-year-old attacker, so he could be quite an interesting one to watch. And then they went back to Thessalonica to pick up James Jego, the Australian central midfielder. He comes from Aris Thessalonica. Don't want to get Palka and Aris mixed up, that's for sure. In terms of outgoings, a surprising one in Edo Kembe. Not necessarily surprising that he left, but surprising that he went to Watford. Didn't think he was quite ready for that step up yet, although he may just be playing championship football next season, the way it's going for them. And he's probably going to have about 7 managers by the time that happens. Knowing Watford, absolute sackathon there, isn't it? So yeah, good luck there. I guess, again, like, nothing massively jumps out. Like, we haven't really seen much of these players play yet. I mean, Teddy Allo's played, I think he started 1 game, Torben Mösel started 1. Ioannis Constantinalis came off the bench. James Jago's been injured, so we haven't really seen much of him yet. But I don't know, nothing leaps out at me from these transfers that says, yeah, no, they're definitely going to be fine now. They're definitely going to survive. I think you're still relying, if you're open, on the squad they've got there already. I guess seeing the outgoings and not seeing Agbadou is a massive plus for them in keeping him and Prevolyak and some of the other guys that they did manage to keep is more of a bonus, I think, than the guys they brought in. I don't know if you guys agree or if you see any of those names on that list and think, oh no, actually, I think that could be a big needle shifter for them in terms of staying up.
I'm still quite worried about them. I mean, I look at the incomings and I think, okay, these are all by and large for the future, but that's what worries me. The future does worry me because I think there are some really big names that are out of contract in the summer, and I don't think they're going to be able to keep those names. So they're going to be losing, I think, at least 2, maybe 3 really big influential players that will have a really material impact on their season next year. There's a lot of debt at the club as well. I mean, they don't really have big windows. They don't really splash the cash up in any way, but we know from what the owners said pre-season that, there was going to be a change of direction now, and that they weren't really going to invest at all, and that, incomings were going to have to wash their face, they were going to have to balance the books and get some of that debt down. The Kayembe sale to Watford will do that slightly, because that's quite a big fee. I'm surprised one, as Ben was saying, but yeah, I do have some worries on the horizon, and there's certainly nothing in this transfer business that reassures me about that, really.
Yeah, or Kayembe can also, of course, find another resort in Udinese or at Ghent, but we'll see what else his future brings. He's actually had quite a good start at Watford, but apart from that, difficult to say much about him. Like, they're quite interesting players. They strengthened their squad in depth for sure. Is it going to be enough? Well, you would think that we've iterated that a lot already, like that their starting 11 really should be good enough, but they're on such a terrible form that you really need to worry anyway. If they should be able to snatch a win or 2 out of it, and that could already be enough if they also get a few draws out of it. But yeah, their schedule is not the easiest one. They already had the teams behind them, most of them at least. So there's They will depend a bit on what other teams are doing, actually, mostly. So that's probably never a really good sign, but we all know that they didn't have much to spend either. So I guess they did bring in a few players, and they strengthened the depth at least. and hopefully for them, some of these players turn out great for them.
Yeah, and I think that's it, isn't it? They're working with finite resources. I guess James Jago is one, like, international experience, played in the Greek league, like at a high level. So he's one you may be looking at, just kind of come in and make an impact more than the other guys. But again, like, young players, it's always exciting to see. Like, really interested to see Konstantilias. I've probably said his name about 3 different ways on this podcast already, but I'm looking forward to seeing him. Torben Mursel as well, I guess. Haven't seen much of him. Teddy Allo, like, there's loads of guys there that you just haven't really seen much of. So it's always nice to see new players and kind of see what they could do. Let's go to Leuven, who had absolutely no one coming in, despite their best efforts to try and get Lamkalzi in as a striker, and looking at other strikers, it just couldn't quite happen for them. There's really not much to talk about for Leuven at the moment. So in terms of outgoings, is Kawin Thamsatsan, the Thai goalkeeper. He's gone to Port FC on loan in Thailand. And then Scotty Sadzu, one of the summer signings, I think he's gone to Nîmes on loan. So just 2 loan players. It's kind of like, while they would have liked a striker, Sorry Kaba's back scoring goals. So they're probably quite happy with the squad as it is. Like, the first 11, again, is quite a decent first 11. So they would have just been kind of looking for major upgrades, I think, which probably weren't out there in the winter's window. So maybe in the summer they'll look for it then. Were you guys surprised they didn't bring in a striker? Or do you think it was just they went after a couple of them, couldn't get it over the line, and they thought, we're not going to stretch ourselves too much to go after someone that actually we're not convinced by?
Yeah, I think that's the story, actually. Yeah, not gonna add much more, but they didn't find anyone, and then Kaba was coming back. So, well, I think they might not be the worst strategy for them either, because in contrary to other teams in their region, I do think they should not really worry too much about the relegation anymore. Not spend too much now and see further in the future in the summer.
Completely agree with all of that.
Yep, I think, like, there was always going to come one team, wasn't there, in this transfer window special, where it's going to be like, we actually don't have much to actually go on with them because they've got such, like, little business happening. But yeah, I think the squad's in a good place. I like lots of their players. So yeah, and they're kind of on the up at the moment. They've got the magician in Mercier providing goals. So yeah, what more do you really need when you've got him in there? Zolderwagen. Let's go to them. Not much in terms of business from them. Obviously, Omar Gavea's come back into the fold. It's basically like a new signing. But in terms of incomings, they brought in Dion Cools on loan from Midtjylland. And then they brought back Timothy Jurgic, as I said earlier. And he's basically started every game since he came back at centre-back. So they clearly highlighted the defence as an issue. In terms of outgoings, Jus van Aken, that experiment signing basically lasted 6 months. And his highlight was a red card in his opening game, and that was it. So, I mean, so take that what you will. I think he might have gone to Henveen, or he's gone to the Dutch league now. But yeah, he was kind of released on a free. So I guess not a massive loss. They didn't get rid of anyone else. Like, do you think Dion Cools and Timothy Jurgic are going to be enough defensively to help them out? Or do you think they should have gone for another look to really revamp that defensive kind of back 3 that they go with?
I think it's very difficult to, as clubs will tell everybody ad nauseum, it's very difficult to do your main business in the winter window for lots of reasons. But I think Zoltaf had a really bad window. I do. I just think that because of the position they're in, I think they need to try and start building for the future now, and they hope that future involves them staying in 1A. I think they're going to be scrapping away till the very end of the season, I suspect, because that squad, although it initially responded positively after Frankie Dury was removed, it seems to have stalled somewhat, and they look like teetering, on the brink. And actually, when you look at their fixtures as well, I was looking at their fixtures earlier on today. Their fixtures for the remainder of the season are not particularly kind to them, and there's a game coming up in a couple of weeks when they play Sarang. That's the one that I think will arguably have the biggest say on potentially which one of those two ends up in that playoff spot.
Yeah, nothing much to add. I had also eyed that fixture for them. Definitely a crucial one. They did strengthen their defense slightly. Is it enough? I doubt it, to be fair. They are really one of the teams we all still worry about, I think. So, yeah, and that hasn't changed.
Yeah, no, definitely agree. I think they might just be okay if they strike it when Gano and Vossen are back. That's kind of the only kind of saving grace for them. We'll get on to the other sides around them in a little bit. I mean, they are just kind of fighting off the relegation playoff space. So it's a lot easier, I guess, in that sense, to only have to fight off one space rather than 2 relegation spaces. But they definitely I felt like they could have done a little bit more if they wanted to. But again, they did quite a lot in the summer, so it's kind of like, how much can you do? Do you keep going and going and going until like you realize actually we got to do a better job of this? So yeah, let's move on from sort of our game to the side just below them in Selang. We actually had to redo this section because we started talking about one player who's actually not there anymore, much to our surprise, in Molawage. So in terms of incomings, it was Daniel Apare, Molawage, Kouadi Yves Dabia from Lille B loan, and Madine Douani from Metz on loan. I'd spent 5 minutes talking about how great Molawage was as a signing. I thought it was going to be really good, and it turns out he's already left. It looks like it's personal reasons, private reasons that haven't been disclosed by the club. So that's a real shame, actually, because I thought he was going to be quite a good signing for them. Daniel Apare, I think, is a good pickup. I think he brings them some 1A experience at least. And he had a decent season last year for sort of our game. And he started all the games since he's come in, so they clearly trust his experience to help them. Dabia as well, like he started a fair amount of games at centre back. Yeah, in terms of outgoings, Tia Pirlo, the centre midfielder, he's gone to Lommel. And Daridel Fabro's loan has ended, so he's gone back. So in essence, it's Apare and two very young players that they've brought in. I don't know now if that's going to be, if that is enough. I mean, they are working limited in terms of what they can do. Like it's free agents and it's loans. That's just kind of how they've been operating and how they've kind of got to where they are with all the Mets kind of loans and stuff. But I don't know, do you feel like they should have been a bigger push to kind of get some players in to stay in the league? Or do you think actually they trust what they've got? They've got some players back fit again. They think they'll be okay and be able to keep going. But I don't know. I just feel like, what's the long-term plan?
Yeah, I think that's the big question, isn't it, Ben? Because we know that when Jordi Condom left by pretty much mutual agreement, he was sacked, but I think there was an unsaid agreement there that they didn't really agree on the future direction of the club. That was a very strong message that kind of came through, and I think this relates to what you're saying there about, you know, what is the plan, and I think this is just the way the club is structured and the way they do their business because of the relationship, obviously, with their parent club Mets that you mentioned. I think if you judge the business on its own, I think it's not bad, and I think they probably will fancy their chances of still getting out of this and securing their future for another season, and they will be now watching that result tonight where Resulta dropped a couple of points and looking at that game that they have against them in a couple of weeks as being absolutely massive now, because if they could win that and leapfrog Zolta, then, you know, the psychology of it all changes going into the last 6 or 7 weeks. So yeah, I mean, I think it's just I think they've had an okay window. If I was a Serang fan, I wouldn't be too disappointed with that. There are big long-term infrastructure issues around the club that remain unsorted at the moment, and certainly aren't going to be sorted, you know, and potentially until sort of next season. And the biggest one is, you know, what is the long-term infrastructure plan for the club, because you don't want them to be in a situation anywhere near like the one Circle have been in for a long time, which thankfully has been addressed now, and that is to continually, you know, being a bit of a yo-yo for incomings and outcomes. You need a degree of stability and kind of a long-term plan, and I don't think that is there at the moment. I think they're just relying on the individual quality of the players and that kind of group dynamic to kind of pull them through, but you need more than that, don't you?
I still also think that they didn't really expect to be in 1A at the moment, so I guess they'll be happy as long as they can, and well, they're not going to really invest a lot, although they still did some business. That they actually signed 2 ex-Real Madrid players inside one transfer window. That's at least something, some feathers that they can put on their head, I guess. If that is an achievement, that's something else. These 2 are Kranings and Opare, both played in the youth levels, at least at Real Madrid. So not that already makes it a bit less impressive, I guess. But Opare still definitely is a good signing for them. Well, Kranings will have to see. But they probably needed a second goalkeeper anyway, so that's a gamble they can take and doesn't cost much. Again, one of these that they're definitely not safe. Well, obviously, since they're in a playoff spot at the moment, play down spot at the moment, I don't think they mind too much either. We know that the defense was an issue. The Wage story is a bit sad for both, especially for the player, of course, since his personal circumstances, whatever they are. Also, it could really hamper their chances of survival because he looked really decent as well in the few games that he played for them.
Just on a slightly funny side note, I was talking about, long-standing infrastructure issues. Today, the club did install a new PA system at the stadium, so they've started.
Yeah, make some noise, but no players to make the noise too. Yeah, no, it's a shame about Monowage, but I guess there's nothing they can do now. They just kind of got to get on with it and go what they've got them there, and hope for the best. I guess one side that probably hopes for the best, but would need an absolute miracle if they were to avoid the drop at this point is Joris Scott. We finally got to them at the end of this massive episode. So in terms of incomings, we have Felipe Avenatti, as we spoke about earlier. He joins on loan from Standard. Dante Rigo comes in from PSV Eindhoven. Outgoings was just Issa Sumari. He's joined Queverly on loan. Yeah, so I guess I wonder if results that they've had in terms of kind of the defeats and stuff recently would have changed how they'd have done their January. If they'd had those before and been this far adrift before, would we have seen Holzhauser go? Would we have seen, I don't know who else people would probably want from the squad? I guess that's one of the issues, but Holzhauser being the main one that would probably have sparked some interest from someone. Like, would they have been like, okay, yeah, we'll sell him? Because now they've got him, he's not going to stay when they go down into 1B. I mean, I'd be very surprised if he does, but I'm pretty sure there's something in his contract about that. Suzuki as well, they've apparently had some offers for him that they kept hold of him. It just seems a little bit bizarre that they were so willing to keep hold of players when it looked so forlorn that you were going to go down. Why not just kind of rejig stuff around? And like, I guess as well, like if you're going to go down, some of these players aren't going to stay anyway. You can kind of get the wages off the books now, get some money in, maybe bring in some players with a look to next year. I feel like that's the way they should have gone, but they didn't. Like Avenatti was someone they really, really wanted to bring in. And I mean, he's been decent so far, but there's a reason he's bounced around a bit and he's never really shone in the Pro League. Like, he's not necessarily the best striker at this level, or like a striker you'd expect to keep you up at this level. So I guess I was slightly disappointed in kind of their approach, and now they've obviously sacked Talente, so it's kind of like, it just seems really muddled, and there's no real, like, there wasn't any real clear direction with this transfer window. I think, Scott, we'd keep, when we were talking about them, remember before the transfer window, you were like, yeah, it needs to be a big window for them. Like, they need to be active, need to do stuff. And they just didn't really do much at all, did they?
No, I remember that very well, because I thought, well, at that point, although it was still looking very bleak, I think with a really big and smart effort, maybe they could have made further inroads, but it didn't happen. I think probably internally there's been an acceptance that the season has been the car crash that we all know it has, and that they needed to kind of clear the decks a bit and start reshaping that squad. And I completely agree with you, Ben. I think it should have happened earlier. They, kind of held their hands up to that. It's difficult as well because, from the Beershot fans' point of view, you don't want to see those signals coming out from the club so early. But for a number of weeks now, actually probably a number of months, we've been saying that they've been so far adrift, nobody's recovered from that position, nobody's managed to dig themselves out of that. There was nothing to suggest that was going to change. And even the 17 games that Tarente had, lost 11, I think, only won 3. There was no indication at any point really that things were moving in a positive direction really at all in a footballing sense, even if they were the right long-term ones. Just even in the short term, it made no difference. In fact, the players' body language told me that they weren't really that engaged at all, so they weren't getting a response. However, they have a rather nice, shiny new training complex planned that is going to happen, so they've got that to look forward to for the future once they've reshaped their squad with a new coach and hopefully can go again at kind of coming back next season, which is going to be hard. We should underline that, because 1B is going to be, as far as we're aware at the moment anyway, a bigger division next year. There's going to be more teams in it, so albeit the promise sides can't win promotion, that'll be part of the deal. Sides are going to come up against a wider variety of players, and that league is going to become something entirely different again. So it's unfortunate, because obviously when they first came up, they stormed it for a while, and it just shows you that sometimes when you have a manager who has the charisma that Hernan Losada had, he is overwhelmingly important, a bit like Blessing at Ostend, and when you rip them out, the whole pack of cards can kind of collapse, and that really what's happened here. It's been quite unpleasant to watch, actually.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys, and they definitely should have started building for next season, because if I'm not mistaken, there's even a clause in Holzhauser's contract that they can go for free in the summer, and I think there was another one of their main players where that was the case. So like, why not take at least some money so you can build? Is it not now? Then at least you have the money already for in the summer. Well, now you just pay, at least in Holzhauser's case, a big contract, I guess, for a few more months, and then he just walks out the door. Yeah, that's just not good management. And well, I guess they still secretly hope that they wouldn't fall back this close. The game against Serrain really, well, did them for sure. And yeah, it's been a weird window as well. Incoming as well, Evanati. Like, apart from everything, I think he could be a decent signing for them actually, but he also has quite a big salary. Of course, they're not. I can't imagine them taking over all of it or a lot of it, but still, like, I'm sure that they still pay enough for what he still can make for a difference this season. And yeah, also just a loan, so it's also not building for something later on either. Weird business. Yeah, weird season for the whole club.
Of course, Beerschot famously turned down almost €5 million from Mechelen, offered that for Holzhauser at the start of the season, which they turned down. That was a bit of a surprise, I think, to everybody. But of course, what Beerschot didn't know at that point was that the season was going to be quite as bad as it's turned out to be. I bet if he offered them that now, it'd be a different story.
Yeah, right. I think the whole kind of vibe around the club has just completely changed in the last 12 months, hasn't it? Like, it's just completely different, and like, yeah, it's just not as carefree and fun anymore. It's just, yeah, quite serious and dour. I think we all agree these signings were never going to be enough to keep them up. They needed a miracle, and that unfortunately isn't going to happen. So yeah, expect to see them do a fair amount in the summer, but they're going to have to, because they'll probably lose a fair amount of players, or maybe not. It's just, you just don't know who's going to be interested in what players and stuff like that. So we shall see. And that brings us to the end of every single team. But before we go, obviously I'm going to ask this question that Scott preempted in our WhatsApp group before. You guys have got to give me your favourite signing of the window. It doesn't necessarily have to be the best player or anything like that, just your favourite signing of the window. Scott, I know because you're prepared, I'll go to you first.
I think I won't surprise you to know that I noted down. I've got 4 that I noted down, but I'm going to be fair. I'll only pick one, and I'm going to go for Matteo Cafaro at Standard. Not just because he started very well. Obviously, since he's come in, he's got 2 goals in 5 games and 1 assist, which is really good. He's really hit the ground running. But that aside, he's actually looked really, really good. His running of the channels is really sharp. He's got a cracking shot on him. You know, he's got a good appetite on the pitch. He's impressed me quite a lot, as I think he has Standard. I think he's surprised them. Luca Elsner has said on a couple of occasions he's been surprised by how good he's been, how quickly. So if I had to pick one transfer of this window, it would be Cafaro at Standard.
The one that I already had forgot about, so hopefully that's not a sign that it will only get worse. But it really impressed was Sakamoto from Ostende. I think he's a really exciting player. And also, well, they needed it as well. So I think that's a good signing for them, and that could be crucial if they end up really in the dogfight, which they still might. So I think that he could be their lifeline as well.
Yeah, no, I can't argue with those 2 exciting players.
But no pressure at all, of course.
yeah, Sakamoto's got to be the saviour. All the pressure's on him now. Yeah, no, 2 great players. I'm going to go for Rick van Drongelen to Kevin Mechelen. They needed centre-backs, they needed defenders. I feel like, maybe I've got this image of Rick van Drongelen from a couple of years ago when he was really, really at the top of his game, when he was really even younger than he is now. But like Joris said, he's still only, 23, plenty of time ahead of him. This could be just the perfect move for him to go play outside of Germany, where there's more pressure on him because of kind of people know who he is and stuff. So yeah, I'll go for Van Drongelen, with a shout out to Yuan as well. I'm really excited to see what he brings to them from St. Gallen on loan. Anyway, I think that's probably all we have to say on this transfer window review. I hope everyone at home listening, or wherever you are listening, has enjoyed it. If you have any comments or anything else you'd like to say about the transfer window, players you think could be really good signings, please just shout us out when we do release this one. We're more than happy to debate this and kind of see what other people think. If you think certain players shouldn't have been let go, any of that stuff, we do love having conversations with everyone about that. So yeah, definitely get in touch. But Scott, Joris, as always, thank you for joining me on this absolute bumper transfer review special. And to everyone else, thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon on another episode of the Belgian Football Podcast.